नमस्ते। सुप्रभात। प्रातःकालीन सत्र, प्रातःकालीन वंदना, अर्पणा एवं प्रारंभिक वंदना। तो भगवा अरहं सम्मा सम्बुद्धो स्वाखातो येन भगवता धम्मो सुपटिपन्नो यस्य भगवतो सावक संघो तन्मयं भगवन्तं सधम्मं ससङ्घं इमे हि सकारे हि यथारहं आरोपिते हि अभिपूजयाम। वे जो हैं अरहंत भगवान सम्यक संबुद्ध, भगवान के द्वारा अच्छी तरह समझाया गया धम्म, धम्म के मार्ग को अच्छी तरह प्रतिपादित करने वाले भगवान के श्रावक संघ, उन भगवान बुद्ध धम्म और संघ की हम यथा उचित सत्कार से पूजा करते हैं। साधुनो भन्ते भगवा शुचिर परिनिभूतोऽपि पश्चिमा जनतानुकंपमानसा इमे सकारे दुःखतपन्नाकार भूते पटिगणहातु अम्हाकं हिताय सुखाय। हमारा सौभाग्य की भगवान को महान निर्वाण की प्राप्ति के बाद भी आगे आने वाली पीढ़ी पर अनुकंपा थी। आदर पूर्वक दी गई यह तुच्छ भेंट कृपया स्वीकार करें। हमारे दीर्घकालिक हित और सुख के लिए। अरहं सम्मा सम्बुद्धो भगवा बुद्धं भगवन्तं अभिवादेमि। स्वाखातो भगवता धम्मो धम्मं नमस्सामि। सुपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो संघं नमामि। अरहंत भगवान सम्यक संबुद्ध, भगवान बुद्ध का मैं अभिवादन करता हूँ। भगवान के द्वारा अच्छी तरह समझाया गया धम्म, उस धम्म को मैं नमन करता हूँ। भगवान के श्रावक संघ, जिन्होंने मार्ग को अच्छी तरह प्रतिपादित किया, उस संघ को मैं नमन करता हूँ। प्रारंभिक वंदना। हन्दमयं बुद्धस्य भगवतो पुब्बभाग नमकारं करोमस्ये। आए हम भगवान बुद्ध की प्रारंभिक वंदना करें। नमो तस्सा भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्सा। नमो तस्सा भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्सा। नमो तस्सा भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्सा। नमस्कार उन्हें जो है अरहंत भगवान सम्यक संबुद्ध। नमस्कार उन्हें जो है अरहंत भगवान सम्यक संबुद्ध। नमस्कार उन्हें जो है अरहंत भगवान सम्यक संबुद्ध। एक रिफ्लेक्शन करेंगे। एक आर्य के धन की गाथाएं। हंदमयं अरिय धन गाथायो भड़ामसे। आए हम आर्य के धन की गाथाओं का पाठ करें। सत्ता धनं शील धनं हिरि ओतप्यं धनं सुत धनं च चागोचा पय्यावे सप्तमं धनं। श्रद्धा का धन, शील का धन, लज्जा एवं पाप भीरुता का धन, श्रुत धन एवं त्याग का धन और प्रज्ञा है सातवां धन। यस्य एते धना अत्थि इत्थिया पुरुषस्वा अदलित होती तं आहु अमोघं तस्य जीवितं। जिसके पास यह धन है, स्त्री हो अथवा पुरुष, उसको धनवान अर्थात अदरिद्र कहा जाता है। उसका जीवन व्यर्थ नहीं है। तस्मा श्रद्धं च शीलं च पसादं धम्मदर्शनं अनुयुज्येत मेधावी सरं बुद्धान शासनन्ति। अतः मेधावी लोग बुद्ध शिक्षा को याद रखकर अपने को श्रद्धा, शील एवं स्पष्ट धम्म दर्शन में लगाए। मंत्री जी, आगे के लिए आपसे इंस्ट्रक्शंस चाहिए, क्या करना है?
बस हम आगे बढ़ते हैं. You can switch on the sharing and I'll display. So आज का जो सेक्शन है that pertains to जो बुद्ध धर्म और संघ में फेथ है, उस पे आज का सेक्शन है कि बुद्धं धर्मं गच्छामि, धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि और संघं शरणं गच्छामि का अजान चा ने थोड़ा सा एक एडिशनल इंटरप्रिटेशन मीनिंग एनकरेज किया था। और फिर से हमें याद रखें कि इसको हमें उसके कॉन्टेक्स्ट में देखना है। सो ही इज लिविंग इन अ सोसाइटी दैट इज ट्रेडिशनली, सो कॉल्ड ट्रेडिशनली बुद्धिस्ट। तो बड़े सामान्य रूप से अम, खास करके उपोषद के दिन या संडेज वगैरह को शरण लेने लोग आते हैं। सो व्हेन एवरीबडी इज सेइंग सो एंड सो शरणम गच्छामि, सो एंड सो शरणम गच्छामि, Ajahn Chah is using that as a expedient means to direct their attention towards something more fundamental than simply reciting it. So, what like yesterday also, what I'd encourage is कि जब हम इसको सुन रहे हैं तो let's try to remember किस context में वो ये बातें कह रहे हैं, and so and not fall into the trap of literally applying it to oneself. So जिस तरीके से वो यहाँ एक अल्टरनेट स्पिन दे रहे हैं, एक इनोवेटिव तरीका सिखा रहे हैं लोगों को सोचने का, हम भी उस तरीके से सोचने की कोशिश कर सकते हैं कि फॉर मी व्हाट इज अल्टरनेट, फॉर मी व्हाट इज इनोवेटिव, एंड सो फोर्थ. So this section is called Faith in the Triple J. Since the days of the Buddha, people with faith in his teachings have declared their commitment to them by affirming three times Buddhang Sharanam Gacchami, I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dhammang Saranam Gacchami, I go for refuge to the Dhamma, Sanghang Saranam Gacchami, I go for refuge to the Sangha. Most simply put, taking refuge in the Buddha means looking to the Buddha as the supreme teacher of the path to peace, compassion, and wisdom. Taking refuge in the Dhamma means taking the Buddha's teaching as the supreme map of that path. Taking refuge in the Sangha means taking the enlightened disciples of the Buddha as supreme leaders on the path, examples that the path is possible to follow, and explainers of it. There is also a more profound way of understanding these three objects of refuge. Lumpur taught that the meaning of the triple gem has a transcendental dimension, that the three objects of refuge refer also to timeless immaterial qualities that may be realized in each person's mind. In this sense, the Buddha refers to inner awakening, the Dhamma to the way things are, and the Sangha to the right practice leading to awakening. Throughout his teaching career, Lumpur sought to encourage lay Buddhists to go beyond a merely superficial affiliation with their religion, expressed in material support for the monastic order and ritual observances. His concern was that they should learn how to use the Buddha's teachings to reduce suffering and increase the quality of their lives. He did this by bringing the teachings down to earth, expressing them in their vernacular, and revealing them as tools to be used in daily life rather than as objects of reverence. This strategy is clearly revealed in the way that Lungpo spoke about the three refuges. He emphasized that Buddha does not only refer to the founder of the religion, who some 2500 years ago lived in India, as it was his realization of the Dhamma that transformed Siddhartha Gautama into Buddha. The Buddha nature and the Dhamma were one and the same thing. When you see the Dhamma, you see the Buddha. and all your doubts vanish. The Buddha is the Dhamma is the Buddha. The historical Buddha did not take enlightenment with him, he left it right here. Therefore, as the Dhamma is timeless, Longpo insisted it is still as accessible to one who follows the Buddha's teaching as it ever was. The Buddha is still present today. The Buddha is the truth. The truth is always present. No matter who is born and who dies, the truth remains the same. It never disappears from the world. It's always here in exactly this way. Seeking to express this idea to a group of teachers, he drew an analogy. There is a body of knowledge and skills that, once mastered, allows people to make a living as a teacher. People become teachers for a number of years and then retire. But the knowledge and skills that made them teachers remain. Similarly, the truth that makes a human being a Buddha still exists. It hasn't disappeared. Two Buddhas are born. One is physical and the other immaterial. As for the true Dhamma, the Buddha said, Anand, keep practicing. You will thrive in the Dhamma Vinay. Whoever sees the Dhamma sees me. Whoever sees me sees the Dhamma. How could that be? It sounds as if the Buddha and Dhamma are being mixed up and made into the same thing. Actually, to begin with, there was no Buddha. The Buddha could only be called by the name of Buddha when he realized the Dhamma. Before that, he was Prince Siddhartha. It's like all of you. Now we are just unenlightened village folk. But if you were to realize the true Dhamma, then you'd be exactly the same as the Buddha. There would be no difference. So understand this point, all of you. Right now, the Buddha is still present. Longpo found the belief originating in scholarly circles that it is no longer possible in the present day and age to realize enlightenment to be a pernicious one. He spoke grimly of the karma created by scholars who criticized those putting effort into practice of the teachings as wasting their time. He considered the holders of such a view like fools who conclude that because they can see no water beneath their feet, that there can be none beneath the earth they stand on. To put it simply, practice is like digging a well. In the Buddha's time, they dug down into the earth in order to find water. When they met roots or rocks, they removed them and eventually they reached water. There was no need to create the water. All they had to do was dig the well to access it. In the present day, you can dig a well in order to get water in exactly the same way. Whenever you get down to the water bearing strata, you'll find water. So I'm thinking maybe we can stop here. And शायद एक यूजफुल चीज़ हमारे लिए सोचने लायक ये है कि बुद्ध धम्म और संघ की जो रेफ्यूज है वो मेरे लिए उसका क्या इम्प्लीकेशन है एंड हाउ मे आई यूज इट इन लाइट ऑफ माय ओन पर्टिकुलर peculiar कंडीशनिंग. तो हम ध्यान रखें कि यहाँ जैसा शुरू में कहा गया, ही इज टॉकिंग अबाउट अ ट्रेडिशनल सोसाइटी जो बेस्ड ऑन आदत शरण वगैरह की बात करते हैं, लेते हैं, बोलते हैं एंड सो. तो यहाँ इसका एक ऑल्टरनेट, जैसे अजय जयसारो लिखा है, ट्रांसेंडेंटल डायमेंशन उन्होंने बताया है. नाउ वी शुड बी केयरफुल टू नॉट इंटरप्रेट दैट एज सेइंग कि देयरफॉर उसका जो proximate dimension है, जो immediate dimension है, that does not stand. It simply means कि उस परिवेश में, उस context में जो immediate dimension था of Shraddha and so forth, that is already somewhat established, well established. And therefore, he's trying to have people see beyond that and more than that. So may we not make the mistake to conclude, therefore, कि उसका जो एक faith based dimension है, that has no role, especially because for many of us perhaps जिस तरीके की ट्रांसेंडेंटल बात यहाँ कर रहे हैं इस सेक्शन में जो हमने पढ़ा, वो शायद हमारे लिए पहले आई, मे बी फॉर मेनी ऑफ अस दैट इज अवेलेबल, एस्टेब्लिश्ड एंड सो फोर्थ. So maybe for us the way to understand the sharans is uh, is through those dimensions that don't exist for us. And what are they? Maybe something worth considering in the next 1 hour. So we can meet again at 6:50, maybe 6:45, 6:50. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Bante. Let's meditate. तो मेडिटेशन का समय पूरा हो गया। जो हमने सुना बुद्ध धम्म संघ की शरण के ऊपर, यदि आपको उसमें कुछ प्रश्न पूछना हो तो पूछ सकते हैं।
तो ये मुझे लगा ये जो स्टेटमेंट है, आप धम्म को देखें तो बुद्ध को देखेंगे, या संघ को देखेंगे तो इसी प्रकार, ये बहुत प्रोफाउंड स्टेटमेंट है। और धम्म को कितने अधिक लेवल्स तक ये आप धम्म को छोटे से छोटे लेवल पे तो आसानी से देख सकते हैं, लेकिन धम्म को पूरी तरह से देखना एक और बात होती है। जस्ट जस्ट ए थॉट, नथिंग मच।
जी बिल्कुल। एंड वन ऑफ द थिंग्स आई लर्नड कि we are encouraged to use utilize ये जो statements हैं in a variety of ways that are enabling to our respective hearts, minds, journeys, and so on. So yeah, sure. However it helps. However it helps.
So the question also is, when you look at Dhamma, the ordinary Dhamma, like a defilement arising in you, you see it. That's seeing Dhamma in some way. But is that equivalent to seeing Buddha? Even a small thing like that.
वो जैसे हमारे कुछ टीचर्स इसको कहेंगे कि अच्छा हु इज सीइंग द एलिमेंट ऑफ सीइंग इज द एलिमेंट ऑफ बुद्धत्व फॉर एग्जाम्पल इस तरह का मैंने एक पिन सुना हुआ है वैसे कहते हैं ना बुद्ध इज द अवेकन्ड वन आप में जो जागरूकता की अपनी क्वालिटी है वो ही बुद्ध है तो इस तरह के कई तरीके हैं इसको देखने के एंड डिफरेंट टीचर्स हैव एक्चुअली जो टीचर्स हमारे साथ शेयर करते हैं ना जैसे मैंने अब समझा है वो एक्चुअली वो चीजें शेयर कर रहे हैं जिस तरीकों से उन्होंने अपने जीवन में किया है एंड वी कैन सी इफ दैट्स हेल्पफुल तो तो ये चीजें आई थिंक इन सम वेज हमें एक्सपेरिमेंट करनी है अलग अलग तरीकों से आजमाना है और देखना है कि भाई मेरे लिए क्या मददगार होता है अलग अलग कॉन्टेक्स्ट में एटलीस्ट दैट्स बीन माय लर्निंग एंड दैट्स मोर और लेस हाउ आई ट्राई टू अप्रोच
Thank you.
एक लिटरेचर से संबंधित क्वेश्चन पूछ लेता हूँ, अगर आप लोग को पता हो कि क्या किसी किसी शाखा में बुद्धिज्म की जो त्रिलक्षण है उसको चार चार लक्षण में भी देखा जाता है, दैट इज अनात्म, दुख, शून्यता और अनित्यता। अनित्यता, दुख और अनात्म पढ़ते हैं, तो क्या किसी शाखा में शून्यता भी आती है? ऑल संखार आर लाइक फोर टाइप्स।
तो शून्य और अनात्म सेम है ना देखिए वो तो हमने पढ़ा भी आई फॉरगेट द नेम ऑफ द सुत्त नाउ कि शून्य द इज द फैक्ट के देयर इज नो सेल्फ खंड जो है वो सेल्फ नहीं है दैट्स बेसिकली व्हाट इट मींस
एक एक्चुअली भंती जी लेक्चर सुन रहा था किसी का, तो उसमें विभिन्न शाखाओं की बात चली थी, थेरवादा, महायान, तो उसमें इस तरह का एक विवरण आया था। तो आई वॉज वंडरिंग कि थेरवाद में 3 है तो किसी और में 4 है क्या, ऐसा पूछ रहा।
आई थिंक बेसिकली उसमें एकेडमिकली अगर आप देखें जैसे एवोल्यूशन हुआ है उसमें केवल इतना हुआ कि उस एलिमेंट जो अनाथ वाला एलिमेंट है उसको कई कमेंटेटर्स फिलोसोफर्स मंक्स ने काफी काफी ऊंचाई तक ले गए उसको और देन इट्स सिंपली बीन गिवन दैट 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 नॉमेनक्लेचर। बट आप फंडामेंटली देखें तो उसमें कोई फर्क नहीं है। इफ यू एक्चुअली रीड डॉक्ट्रिनली वो किस चीज को शून्य बता रहे हैं, इट्स एग्जैक्टली द सेम, एटलीस्ट जितना मैंने जितना समझा है।
ओके, नाउ आई रिमेम्बर, इट वाज अबाउट टाइबेटन बुद्धिज्म। सोंगखापा जी जो हुए हैं उन्होंने शायद, आई थिंक इट वाज इन डिफरेंस टू दैट, सो जस्ट एकेडमिक क्वेश्चन ऑफ कोर्स।
हाँ बिल्कुल। आप लामा सोंगकप्पा की जो लाम रिम है, द पाथ टू समथिंग आई डोंट रिमेम्बर, उसको देख लें, एग्जैक्टली द सेम। ऑन द बुद्धम संग थिंग, एक जो मुझे विचार कई बार आता है, एंड आई थिंक प्राइवेटली आई हैव डिस्कस्ड इट विद सम ऑफ यू, कि जैसे हम देखते हैं कि कम से कम वैदिक परंपराओं में और भी आई थिंक इवन इन सम फॉर्म्स ऑफ द ऑर्गेनाइज्ड क्रिश्चियन चर्च, जिस चीज को हम भक्ति या भक्ति भाव कहते हैं, इट्स समटाइम्स very helpful, useful, necessary, in fact, for some minds, some people, some minds at some times to have some recourse to something of that nature, especially to uplift, inspire, and so forth. तो मैंने एक देखने की कोशिश ये की है, एंड मुझे ऐसा लगा कि इन एटलीस्ट माय एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ माय फेलो मोनास्टिक्स, जो कि नेसेसरीली ज़्यादातर एक ट्रेडिशनल बुद्धिस्ट थेरवाद बैकग्राउंड से नहीं आए हैं, तो मैनी ऑफ देम हैव आल्सो स्ट्रगल्ड विद द एब्सेंस ऑफ, or rather with the inability to find ways and means within traditional थेरवाद, or at least within traditional थेरवाद जैसे कि हम उसको समझते हैं, to uplift themselves, uplift the heart, uplift the mind, um, um, in ways that becomes possible via approaches like bhakti in the Vedic parampara. So, and in some senses, ये जो मेरी एक विडंबना है वो अभी भी चल रही है, especially when I meet uh, fellow monks who struggle with this. There is some difficulty in offering um, strictly Theravadan tools in the nature of bhakti. So it's something I'm sharing, and if somebody has something to say to it, then I'll be happy to hear it.
The baristas have that flavor. The baristas have that flavor. It is not exactly that. The flavor is similar. Sambandhanubhavena, anubhavena. No, that's it. Similarly, in Atanatya Parita, Sangsi Satchena Silena and so on. So even statements like of some of our senior teachers that the food which we are getting in England is basically the paramis of Buddha. So then there is a flavor of that kind in them. That's how I look at it. Many of the parittas have that flavor if you look at it carefully.
So now what I'm about to ask you is speculative. तो द फैक्ट कि उस प्रकार का फ्लेवर जो हमारे अर्ली मटेरियल हैं, जो अर्ली कैनन है, उसमें उस प्रकार का फ्लेवर नहीं आता या कम आता है, मे बी एक्सप्लेन्ड in your own, subjective view. How do you explain it? Of course you have no way of knowing what was going on then, but speculatively.
Again, the society in which Buddha arose was a Brahminical society.
Exactly.
This was the main
Mm.
um, belief at that time, and therefore, and it had been taken to such heights
Mm.
that nothing else was seen as important.
जी.
So the situation demanded that you bring back the equilibrium. So to bring back the equilibrium, this part was de-emphasized.
Mm.
But you can see later, as the time passed by, you have the Jagga Sutta.
Which is similar, yeah, very similar.
It's exactly, it's almost the same. He says they get freedom by looking at the flags of those people. No, there's no, they're not free from Vitaraga, Vitadosh, but Buddha is free. So if you remember Buddha Dhamma Sangha, you'll be freed from fear. In a very prima facie manner, it looks like that. Of course, it has a deeper implications, but it also has that flavor again. I'm just mentioning of the nature of the flavors,
And speculative.
Mix it together, so teaching and bhakti or devotion gets mixed together. So to the Bhojanga Sutta, the Girimananda Sutta, they have a kind of a mixed flavor of. If we try to rationally ask the question, Bhojanga Sutta से क्या हो जाएगा? You can't answer that. And then of course I have known people trying to answer it. नहीं नहीं उससे it gives inspiration. Then when at that time the person starts practicing, then his illness gets away. This kind of rational explanations have been attempted. So that's why I say it's just a matter of restoring the flavor. Firstly, taking people away from that illusion that this will sort out the whole problems, that only bhakti will take you out. You first decry all that practices. And then when the people get into problems, and monks die because snake bite, they are told, you've not practiced metta towards the reptiles and so on. So how would chanting of Sutta or Khanda Paritta prevent them from snake bite? Rationally speaking, you can't rationalize it. To a Western scientific mind, these are not congruent with teachings of the Buddha. You can see Stephen Batchelor and others trying to put it aside. He has a niyota. These are later additions. These are later additions to the teachings. So there are some hints of that, not really much.
So would you then also again speculate कि भाई इसका ये भी शायद एक इशारा है कि जो उस समय के प्रमुख फॉलोअर्स थे ले और मोनेस्टिक, they were already they did not need that form of support.
They came from that society where that was the main support.
Hmm.
So the whole process of yajna and this is basically devotion to the devas and get some benefits from there. So to remove that conception, firstly, the Vedas were put aside as not authoritative. Experience was authoritative. So that was the first step. But people do get, I don't know, I remember myself also in the first 10 years of my practice, felt so drained out, and kind of जो कहते हैं ना,
Yeah, exactly, drying up. Yeah.
ये जो थे ना स्वामी क्या नाम था, रवि शंकर जी ने मुझसे कहा था ये यार बिल्कुल रसहीन है ये तो,
Yeah, exactly.
मैं इसमें रस डाल रहा हूँ कुछ. So it does feel if you don't practice those metta, paritta, chanting, if you don't do that, we didn't do. So that feels something is, you become tried, kind of like a dried bamboo stick. So the human comprehensive teaching has to be accounted for. That's why the practice of metta, these other aspects of Brahma Vihara are so important. They restore our connection with the society, with the people, moving by compassion, moved by. So those are seen as good qualities. Otherwise, why should Buddha go to Vaishali and do all the Ratana Sutta and all that? The very belief that an enlightened one coming to our town will relieve us of suffering has a great element of faith in it. For the people, there's nothing other than faith and devotion to the person that is a very good person.
Am I right to understand that even in the Vedic tradition, the bhakti aspect became much more serious much later, maybe in the mid 20th century, mid 19th century?
The bhakti in the form in which it is known now,
yes,
was the Middle Age stuff of Tulsidas and Surdas and Mirabai. That is the form with which we are seen. That was absolute, total surrender. But in the Vedic rituals also, there is a strong element of that.
and
In
I think
terms of
one would
seeing yajnas as, of course, you could say they are more like barter, but that you do yajna and you feed the devas and devas give you things in return. That has been the traditional understanding of the yajna. So that they did promote, for example, devotion to the powerful devas, Brahma, Rudra. They are found in the Vedas. Rudra is very prominently found.
even
Prajapatis.
that the practitioners of Vedic philosophy would have seen, at least to my mind, seems that it can't be very inspiring, even those kinds of rituals. And perhaps Bhagavan Buddha tried to put more meaning into those rituals and into reinterpreting them in some way. Not the same rituals, but some replacements of those.
Yeah. The Aditya Paryaya Sutta is a classic example. He changed the notion of fire. So there was no need to put samidha in the fire. The fire was already burning. It had to be put off rather than lit. So he turned it totally upside down.
Really, when he gives advice to a young man as to what it means to worship the 4 directions or 10 directions,
Yeah.
that also is in a similar vein.
Yeah. So all the present rituals he reinterpreted, and in many cases, in the process, they were rendered the way they were done. They were rendered as ignorance. For the Sanatan Dharma, Vedas are the root. So if you say the authority, challenge the authority of Veda, then nothing is left. The grounding is, the whole footing is cut. Everything else is, because in Vedic literature, it is Shabda Praman. So there's a very fundamental difference there. Anyway, that's okay.
Bhante, to the point that you had made about, the absence of external refuge can be quite challenging for people, especially if they've come from a theistic tradition, and even for modern Indian people who have, this idea of a deity and avatars and things like that. One thing that might be helpful is the fact, obviously we have the refuge and the Sangha, but, if you, in the Pali Canon, for example, Brahma Sampati was once returner or non-returner, actually. And there are many devas, and I'm sure that Professor Dharji would know all the details. Like there are thousands of awakened ones within these other realms, and including Indra, who was considered a stream enterer. So that, I mean, this idea of an external refuge is not such a difficult one, I would imagine, because there are in these other realms beings that are awakened to a certain degree and might not necessarily be that averse to helping serious practitioners in the way that they may or can. So that might be something also for us to think about, as in, this idea of, my own merit or my own parami is my refuge, which is absolutely correct. But for people who feel perhaps they need some kind of group of support external to themselves, there is the idea of a sangha that may not necessarily be just the monks in this world, but beings in other realms too. If that is something that the mind is open to, then the Pali Canon is replete with that.
नहीं बिल्कुल ठीक बात है. I agree with you and thank you for pointing that out. दिक्कत एक्चुअली ये हो रही है ना, जैसे मैंने एक्सपीरियंस किया है कि ऑन द वन हैंड ऑनेस्टली हमारी familiarity with the Pali canon is actually very limited. है ना, part of the problem is that, including in monasteries, including amongst monks. तो मेरे ख्याल से this combination of the absence of a traditional background, lack of familiarity with the width of the canon. I mean, obviously canon से कुछ familiarity तो है, but उसकी जो width है, उसकी जो diversity है ना, उससे familiarity कम है. एंड देन थर्ड फैक्टर जो मैं देखता हूँ इज द इज whatever are the reasons for many people, now obviously I'm talking about fellow monastics coming from backgrounds जहाँ पे कि कुछ ना कुछ साइकोलॉजिकल इमोशनल डिसफंक्शनैलिटी रही है. तो ये जो कॉम्बिनेशन है इट इज आई मीन आई नो ऑफ few friends in this bucket and that's why I'm talking about it. ये जो कॉम्बिनेशन है इट क्रिएट्स सिचुएशंस जहाँ की अभी आपका पन्या बेस्ड रेफ्यूज इतना डेवलप नहीं हुआ है और कोई रेफ्यूज है नहीं, है ना. तो वो बड़ा मामला जैसे वो कह रहे थे ना ड्राई बैम्बू वाला, वो इट्स दैट्स एक्चुअली इट्स अ फेयरली it's a phenomena that I notice quite a bit now. तो इसलिए in my own limited way I try and suggest or do what is possible, but generally canonical within Theravada framework उसको कर पाना is at least in my limited experience a bit of a challenge. बट आप ठीक कह रहे हो. आई थिंक अगर उसको इनोवेटिवली, आई मीन आई थिंक दैट्स द पॉइंट ऑफ अ टीचर ना, जो उस व्यक्ति के नीड के अनुसार उसको कुछ ऑफर कर सके. दैट्स एग्जैक्टली द पॉइंट.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really serious issue, and so it's not a frivolous one, because as you said, the refuge of Panya is not yet available, and maybe sometimes not even the refuge of Parami is available, right, or Sila. And then, but there are teachers like Ajahn Kalyano has written a biography that you may have read, or autobiography rather, which I think, especially for modern people and those who didn't grow up Buddhist, it's actually quite a unique autobiography because, as you know, he's of English background and he's written about lots of his experiences that ordinarily are usually thought about only to happen to Thai monks. And then Ajahn Achalo also talks quite a bit about it. So it might be helpful for
नहीं,
people to
ठीक
sort of.
बात है. आई एग्री विद यू. इनफैक्ट वन ऑफ द थिंग्स दैट आई समटाइम्स एनकरेज इज एग्जैक्टली दैट कि भाई ऐसी जगह पे भी रह सकते हैं जहाँ पे कि इस तरह के का माहौल है. या यू आर वेरी राइट अबाउट दैट. वहाँ आई मीन देयर आर अदर लिमिटेशंस देयर, बट I mean, yeah, I agree with you. There are at least some places where that sort of a flavor is available. I think दिक्कत ये हो रही है ना कि for many people don't really have that what's the word for it? Don't have that
The mind
latitude.
won't allow it. Yeah, the mind
One
won't
is
allow.
one is
Yeah,
mind, and the other is also the condition.
yeah.
तो आप सीमित हैं, आपको यहाँ रहना है या इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में रहना है, और
Oh, I
वो
see.
नरिशमेंट अवेलेबल एंड इट्स वेरी कॉमन. अगर आप देखेंगे ना, आप मिलेंगे लोगों से, आप पता चलेगा इट्स वेरी कॉमन एक्चुअली. द फैमिन ऑफ इंस्पिरेशन. इंस्पिरेशन किसी प्रकार का तो है, बट ओवर ओवर इयर्स इट बिगिंस टू पीटर आउट.
Yeah.
तो
Yeah, I've heard this from other monastics.
हम्म,
But I mean, I just feel that maybe in this modern context of interpreting Buddhism, there may have been in certain quarters an attempt to strip this very important aspect of the teaching because it's considered not serious or important or frivolous, or as Stephen Batchelor, oh, it was added later. But like if you really look at it sort of in an unbiased, balanced manner, it is everywhere. It's not just in one sutta or another. It's almost like a framework, like recollection of devas. Like, why did the Buddhas add that to the small recollection, the Anusatis? So I don't know. Because it's interesting you bring this up because this is a conversation that I've also had with some of my friends who are monastics, and they have to some degree been able to overcome this issue by being open to these teachings in the canon and exploring them gingerly at first because it doesn't seem familiar or even necessarily their mind will accept. But there is a way for the mind to sort of build acceptance to this idea gradually, I think.
हाँ, नहीं, ठीक बात है. इसी दैट इज वेयर इट नीड्स अ वेरी स्किलफुल टीचर ना, जो आपके मन के अनुसार आपको गाइड कर पाए।
Yeah, you're right.
और एंड एज यू नो द मॉडल एटलीस्ट इन थाईलैंड इज नॉट एग्जैक्टली, दैट्स द ग्रेटनेस ऑफ द होल गुरुकुल थिंग, कि भाई वो वन टू वन है, तो द टीचर इज एबल टू गाइड यू वेरी explicitly according to your specific need.
Yeah,
Very nice. Thank you.
thank you.
One thing which I found very helpful is to contemplate on the Akantha realm. According to this is the Buddhist cosmology, which we especially studied in the Brahmajala Sutta. So the Akantha realm is the realm of people who are all anagamis and they have a very long life, extending to thousands of eons. And then some of them become arhants and they stay there because their lifespan is very large. So if you can contemplate on them as as Anusati, that gives a
अब सब ठीक है, बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं आप। अब आप देखें, जैसे जो आप ब्रह्मजाल सूत्र की बात कर रहे हैं, है ना, अब वी रेड इट, एटलीस्ट आई हैव रेड इट, कुछ नहीं हुआ until it came to this vast and it received the sort of interpretation that you were able to offer. जो आप इंटरनेट पे भी देखें, ब्रह्मजाल सूत्र की जो भी टीचिंग्स हैं, दे आर देयर, but they don't necessarily, at least to me, they don't necessarily really uh, provide this thing that we are discussing. It's exactly the point. आप ठीक कह रहे हैं, yeah, it can be done. प्रश्न ये है कि from where somebody is to it can be done is a distance to be traveled. वो समस्या ख्याल से वहाँ है। तो वो जो स्किल है या वो जो that ability, it's basically a pedagogue, an issue of pedagogy, of teaching skill. वो हम विद इन अ थेरवाद फ्रेमवर्क कैसे करें। सो आई एम श्योर थेरवाद में उस प्रकार के वो होंगे, यदि कोई उस स्किल का व्यक्ति है जो उसको इंटरप्रेट कर सके, दिखा सके, बता सके।
Bhante, I want to just add one other thing to this because I think this is really important conversation. You know, in my experience, most of the Kubajans that I've met tend to be careful about bringing this up if the person who's inquiring is from a non-Buddhist background, because they assume in some ways that it will have an adverse effect, like it might actually make that person lose faith in the path because they don't want to hear about devas and such like that. But honestly, I think that most Kuba Ajans will talk about these things if they feel that the person listening is not going to be put off by them. So that is something really that's been my experience, and I think that they purposely, like even in Ajahn Chah's biography, as I'm sure you know, he didn't talk about these things, right? But he talked about these things to the monks that already had some of these experiences and had an open mind to them in which he thought they could be helpful. But he didn't want to bring it up, and this is what most teachers, they don't want to complicate your already complex life as a monk by talking about things that you don't have access to, you don't have a cultural familiarity with. They know that it'll just make your whole confusion worse. But I think that for those people that are open to it, they are open to talking about it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. It's true.
See, it depends on say, as I often keep on saying, same medicine can be poison for another person. So who exactly needs this kind of contemplation has to be assessed by somebody, by the teacher, whether this kind of contemplation is appropriate for a person at this stage or not. That's the real key issue. Because a person who is already coming from the background where everything is left, surrender is done to the deity, and I don't want to do anything, for him it will be very disastrous. But for other person who is totally dried out and is not willing to see anything, and is seeking refuge in X, Y, Z, that may be a better, equally helpful refuge, because as Bhante said, Panya and
Samadhi.
Samadhi are not developed to
Development.
such an extent. Shila may be good, but Samadhi and Panya are not developed to that extent that you get a quietened mind and you are really able to take refuge in Panya. Then the teacher has the role. In traditional Indian systems, teacher personally has a one-to-one role with the disciple. But what does it mean? That he sees what exactly is his deficiency, as we see it in Ajahn Cheh's examples. Which there's other book is there, or even in Stillness Flowing, there are certain examples of how he gave specific teachings to different people. So that kind of a, when a person is feeling dried out, as I was feeling, I remember after about 10, 15 years. So then we have to contemplate deeply and figure out what to do about it. So as we see remaining within the Theravada framework of teaching, there are various ways in which one can take develop this faculty of confidence and devotion, because that's the way it works. Trust, devotion, confidence, they all supplement each other.
Hmm. Hmm.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you for the conversation. It was really insightful. Thank you.
Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagavan Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivadin Swakhato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namassami Patipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sankho Sanghang Namam.
तीन बार भंते जी को प्रणाम करते हैं। प्रथम प्रणाम, द्वितीय प्रणाम, तृतीय प्रणाम। Thank you everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.